Joshua Graham is one of the most legendary characters in all of Fallout New Vegas, a member of Caesar's Legion, cast out in humiliation, who returned home to welcoming arms. Taking a quick glance at his stats, we can see that he has an endurance of 10 and a natural damage threshold of 50, making him unbelievably strong. Without console commands, however, there is no way to obtain that defense, even while using his armor. This leads me to the conversation of chems. Normally, players can take medics, slasher, and battle brew to get a maximum of 85% damage resistance, making even couriers with light dusters immune to damaging attacks. But in Joshua's case, things are going to be a little bit different.
You are kind to offer, but no, there's nothing you can do. We don't use chems, but I learned long ago that I'm immune to their effects.
So we've got what armor he uses. We've got that he can't use chems. But what about his weapons? Joshua is expertly familiar with a .45 pistol, as is seen with his skilled cleaning of the weapon when we first see him. But we can't have access to that gun until we start Honest Hearts, the DLC where we find Graham himself. One last thing here before we start off this run. What version of Joshua are we going to be playing as? Many players encourage Joshua to execute Salt Upon Wounds with the Sneering Imperialist perk. More still don't have that perk, and decide to kill Salt Upon Wounds in an honorable fight. But arguably the best ending for Graham is to exterminate the Whitelegs, but spare Salt Upon Wounds. This does require a speech of 90, so it'll be interesting seeing how we get there, but this version of Joshua is what we're going to be playing as once we get through Honest Hearts. With all that information out of the way and the limitations of this run written on this fancy chalkboard behind me, let's put on our thigh highs and see if we can beat Fallout New Vegas as Joshua Graham. Sitting up from Doc Mitchell's bed after a late night at church, I tell the suave doctor my name and get to work putting together my special stats. I pumped up Perception to 6 for better criticals, Endurance to 7 to help combat Radchild's negatives, and Luck to 10 because I won't be able to utilize implants from the clinic this run. While Graham only mentions chems, I've decided to avoid the clinic implants, Stimpaks, Redaway, and Red-X for this run, as well as the aforementioned chems. I do want to put emphasis on the word clinic for the third time for some shenanigans that we'll get into later, but until then I'll be grabbing guns, speech, and survival for my tag skills. Guns may be obvious, but the other two are a little bit more run specific. Speech at 70 is needed for Joshua's better ending dialogue, and survival at 70 is needed because I am a Radchild enthusiast. With Built to Destroy and skilled at my fingertips for more critical damage and skill points, I sell a bunch of DLC items to Chet for a bit of an early game boost in caps, and break into the Good Spring Saloon. Here I'm able to grab the 2 magazines on top of the crate, for both barter and speech respectively. Making a detour to the cemetery for the snow globe, and hugging the mountain to get past the Cazadors just north of town, I walked past a few people who took BDSM a little bit further than I've ever gone. I'll be sure to mark that down on my kink list. No to being strung up after being killed. You'll quickly find out here that I didn't take a very efficient route to get to my destination, purely because I wanted enough experience to level up. Stopping by Westside, I sell some more gear to good old Bob before discovering a few more places, like the Southern Cistern, North Vegas Square, Freeside's North Gate, and of course the Crimson Caravan. Now is a good time as any to mention that I will be allowing myself to use doctor bags this run. According to the crafting recipe, no actual medicine or chems are utilized, meaning that presumably Joshua will be able to utilize them with no issues. Wanting even more caps, I grabbed the combat armor on the 2 cuties outside of the sacked caravan before checking in with Vendertron. I did ask him how his day was going and he responded with a robotic moan, so I'm going to assume that that means he has plenty of lubrication. At level 2, I grab Rapid Reload and some more speech before stopping by the Grub and Gulp for some food and water. Lupe is one of my favorite spots for water, but another good one is William from the Camp McCarran Mess Hall. To make my way through Honest Hearts, I stop by Jed Masterson. He essentially has me drop all the water bottles that I just picked up, so I end up looting all the bags outside and ultimately his team's corpses. I don't think that I can be charged with grave digging at this point because, you know, they're not in graves, so I've got that going for me. Paulo Strzok is my guide and he's actually a really cool dude, something that I haven't noticed before. Sure, he sneaks up on you and has numerous interesting pieces of attire, but he is actually a killer with a .45. Unfortunately, he doesn't have it in his inventory, so I am forced to just watch him dispatch all of the enemies instead. If anything, I feel more like Joshua Graham not being able to attack anything because I have my minion attacking things for me. One of the things that I wished I would have done differently this run was had more intelligence. Sure, it wasn't really beneficial in terms of skill points, but being able to complete the skill checks and dialogue is something that I feel like Joshua Graham would be able to do. At the very least, he would definitely have a high intelligence. It isn't long before I'm at the man himself. He introduces me to Zion, and I appreciate his words.
We should have given you a better welcome on your first visit to Zion. But from what I hear, the Whitelegs beat us to it. I don't know if you were close to the other members of your group, but you have my sympathy. Daniel and I need pre-war tools to help us navigate beyond Zion. Should we need to evacuate, these instruments will be vital to us. Thank you. Fallow's chalk can help you find your way around the valley.
Before leaving to go on Joshua's quest, I checked his inventory and managed to pick up several 45 attachments as well as ammo. Because he has numerous sitting on his desk, I decided to steal multiple to be able to repair them into one good one. This doesn't work as well as what I had hoped, so I end up having to purchase 2 from him anyway. Because we are using pistols for this run, I did opt to go for a sneak build in the end, but keep in mind that Joshua would be able to kill pretty well everything before it even remotely troubled him, so we really won't be role-playing that side of him. Down at the wrecked bus, I grab the broken compass and repair it with nearby parts. Going to climb up the mountain, I dispatch a few young geckos as well as my first whiteleg. Nothing at this point proved too daunting, especially with Fallow's chalk at my side, but we did have some fun encounters with a giant rad scorpion. On the bridge, we played a little bit of Twister before I ended up running across and jumping over to the other side. Unfortunately, that left Fallow's chalk still over there, and I had to go back and save him from his rather nasty demise. He definitely came pretty close to death. Stepping inside the lodge, I do deal with a few young geckos. Keep in mind at this point that I don't have armor, so I'm taking everything nice and slow, making sure that I survive to be able to get the armor in the first place. Grabbing the radios, I'm able to level up, putting more points into speech, survival, and ultimately grabbing comprehension. Heading over to the ranger station, I sterilized the kit of medical supplies with alcohol, and looted a little bit more, trying to find every single secret that I can. It wasn't long before I found myself in the general store for the lunchboxes. I and many others are really confused as to why we need these lunchboxes to begin with, but I'm going to assume that they're for trail mix. After all, you can't get very far in life without trail mix. Wrapping up there, I have a close encounter with a Yaoguai cub. This definitely isn't the last time that I'll be dealing with Yaoguai, but keep in mind that they are all really beefy when only going up against them with a pistol and no real build yet. I did take the time at this point to check whether or not that I have taken any chems, and here you can see that I have not taken any stim packs, Rad-X, Radaway, or chems. Heading over to Daniel, he tells me that the supplies are appreciated, but that I'm going to need to do a little bit more work to ensure their victory. Unfortunately, Fallow's chalk does leave my service, so I am left with all of the gear that I had hoarded and have to slowly walk back to Joshua. Waking Cloud interrupts me temporarily, so I'm able to store a few things in her inventory before getting to Joshua himself. Again, I'll let him speak.
Given those 2 choices, yes. In the best of all possible worlds, they would just leave us in peace. But they won't. I don't enjoy killing, but when done righteously, it's just a chore, like any other. Practiced hands make for short work, and the good Lord knows there's much to be done here.
To a certain extent, Joshua seems trapped here, like he is forced to do something that he doesn't want to do. I inquired a little bit more about himself when I asked if he is in much pain, with a speech check of 70. This is where we learned that he can't consume chems, a big rule for this run.
It never stops burning. My skin. Every day I have to unwind the bandages and replace them with fresh ones. Exposing my body to the air is like living through it again. But it's better to be clean than comfortable.
After our conversation, I'm able to sell Joshua all of my stuff as well as being able to craft more ammo. While 25 bullets doesn't seem like very much, especially with the gun that we're using, it is very beneficial that we collect all the ammo that we can. So much so that I finally learned how to reset Joshua Graham's vendor. Waiting outside of Angel Cave, I was able to restock his vendor every 3 days. That, combined with the infinite pool of water and my well-sized collection of food supplies, I was able to reset the vendor as many times as I needed, ultimately walking away with over 500 rounds. I immediately put my collection of ammunition to good use on a cazador before stepping inside of the cave. At this point, I do learn that anti-venom is not a chem. I know it seems kind of weird me double checking all the items that I consume are not chems, but this will actually become a crazy interesting run saver later on. So again, anti-venom is not considered a chem. Stepping inside to deal with the giant spore plants, as well as the numerous traps littered around the key that we need to get to the stash, I do take a little bit of time here reading the terminal. I find myself interested in the survivalist, so if you guys would like to see me do a video of me tackling Fallout New Vegas as the survivalist, let me know down in the comments below. Once done inside, Waking Cloud and I step out to deal with the mantises as well as witness her be an absolute unit. 2 giant soldier ants and a giant red scorpion basically had her surrounded, but she was able to come out on top. That is some Dommy Mommy energy if I've ever witnessed it. At level 6, I do grab the Gunslinger perk. I'm still not sure if this perk actually does what it says it does, especially because I don't typically use VATS, but I can kill things, so that's really all that matters. Again, checking whether or not a particular item is a chem, I learned that a stealth boy is not considered a chem. Now, while Nightkin are addicted to them, it is not considered a chem based on the game, therefore I would consider it acceptable for this run. This guy actually allows me to sneak just right into the Whitelegs camp and steal both of their totems with no issues. I then disarm several bear traps as well as deal with more Whitelegs, thus securing the bridge that was going to be utilized as an escape route. Once done with all that jazz, I step inside the Yawgwai cave to place several explosives at key points. Technically speaking, I am utilizing something other than a pistol to be able to kill things, but because this is interacting with a quest, again I find it okay for this run. After blowing up the place, the Whiteleg does try to escape, but I make sure to viciously put them down. While we've pretty well wrapped up Honest Hearts here, I did decide to do Waking Cloud's side quest for Whitebird. He essentially sends me on a wild goose chase to collect various plants. Then I drank some strange tea and immediately checked to see whether or not it was considered a chem. Fortunately, it wasn't, and I was able to do this mission this run. Heading towards the ghost of She, I put down a few more Yawgwai cubs and began the battle. Unfortunately, this was pretty tricky as I had to balance not only my own survivability, but Waking Cloud's as well. After a few attempts and a swap to HP rounds, I was able to put down the ghost of She rather quickly, thus allowing me to learn more about Waking Cloud. From Daniel's dialogue, we learned that her 3 children managed to get away safely, but her husband had died while protecting the children. I, of course, being the little snitch that I am, told Waking Cloud almost immediately. This led to an awkward moment that saw Daniel and Waking Cloud walking into one another due to pathfinding. This is truly a New Vegas moment. Buying some more ammo from Joshua Graham, we have to make a decision. Do we stand with Joshua Graham against the Whitelegs, or do we join Daniel in his escape? Because of course we're doing a Joshua Graham playthrough, I have to decide with Joshua Graham, and he gave me the perk that allowed me to do more damage with my 45 due to a reduced spread and more critical hit chance. A lot of times in these runs, I end up dying more times than I really care to admit. This is another example of that. I died so many times here just trying to get through the Whitelegs as I had no armor, no real consistent way of healing, and they just seemed to appear out of nowhere. Not to mention the fact that Joshua Graham himself, not me, left randomly and disappeared, forcing me to kill all of them by myself. At this point, I just kind of ran away through most of the enemies nonchalantly, and had hoped that I would be able to make it out of there alive. At one point, I did level up to level 8, which allowed me to grab the Radchild perk. While I couldn't use this perk here at Zion because there is almost no radiation outside of the food items, as we learned from the Honest Hearts video at level 1, it will allow me to essentially utilize the perk right after exiting Honest Hearts. This bridge section caused me to die roughly a dozen times, and I'm not sure why. I ended up pulling out all the stops, including the use of a stealth boy. Eventually, Joshua Graham left our company for the second time, and we were forced to go through the caves. I took things slowly here, and made sure that I was able to get through successfully before double-checking my speech ability. Because of the fact that I had comprehension combined with a Meeting People magazine, I was able to get a total of 90 speech at level 8. Walking in on Joshua Graham with one of his lovers, we learn the importance of a safe word. I'm able to convince Joshua with a speech of 90 that he shouldn't kill any of the bottoms, and that they are a precious commodity. This allows Salt Upon Wounds to leave, and Joshua to become a better version of himself. While he is a man full of anger, I do thoroughly believe that he means well at heart.
The threat of the Whitelegs ended. Joshua Graham helped the sorrows and dead horses tend to their fallen comrades and secure Zion. The courier's words had stayed Joshua's wrath in his darkest hour. and in sparing salt upon wounds, he was changed. While he continued to advocate militant opposition to the enemies of New Canaan, he sometimes showed quarter to those who crossed his family. Eventually, this new spirit would diminish the myth of the burned man in distant lands. A small price for the peace it brought to Joshua Graham.
Looting the locker at the end of the DLC, we were able to get quite a few items that are necessary for this run. A light shining in darkness, a unique 45 pistol, as well as Joshua Graham's armor. Now I do want to mention that I have a mod that allows us to utilize the head wrap, and it's also why you see 2 copies of the armor in my inventory. Please keep in mind that this armor is balanced and that the damage threshold isn't very generous. Once back in the Mojave, not necessarily burned, but a changed man nevertheless, I began doing the quest that I normally do in every run. This includes taking care of Horus, talking with Pacer, making out with the 2 hot boy toys in Mormon Fort, cuddling the king himself, partying with the hottest chick at all the raves, and petting my future princess, to ultimately ease the tensions between the NCR and the people of Freeside. At level 10 here, I'm able to grab the perk Finesse, which allows me to do even more damage with critical hits. If you haven't figured it out by now, we are going for a crit build. Hitting the road just outside of Good Springs, running past Gene skydiving, and getting dust in my bandages in Hidden Valley, I kill some bark scorpions as well as some centaurs. This allows me to get to the devil's butthole and get irradiated. Red Child may seem like a goofy perk, but trust me, it's one of the best in the entirety of the game. While I'm here, I'll also deal with several centaurs before selling any gear that I don't necessarily need at good old Vendortron. Over at Nellis, I make a deal with good old-fashioned George before talking with Pearl and Raquel. This allows me to start getting a jump on doing the Boomer's questline. Something that I learned from doing a livestream on the channel's Discord was that there were several cases of armor that can sell for quite a bit, so I grabbed those before talking with Loyal and utilizing his sonic emitter to kill all the ants. While this is kind of weird because it does count as enemies killed, it also saves me time, so I'm gonna do it anyway. Raquel appreciates the support, and I sit down and watch a lecture that I've watched at least 15 times now, before grabbing a crap ton of missiles from Vendortron to give them to Raquel. As always, she immediately wants to sleep with me, but I tell her no because I'm a family-friendly channel. In order to fix our relationship, I go to Dr. Usanagi and pick up a Fixing Things magazine. This allows me to better my relationship with Raquel, as well as repair Loyal solar panels. Doing so allows me to get idolized by the Boomers and receive the quest to raise the bomber from the bottom of the lake. Before I do that though, I do stop by Boulder City to talk with Lieutenant Monroe and Jessup to ensure that the Great Khans and the NCR are off on a good foot. I even talked with Monroe again to actually complete the quest for once. Planting the ballast and once again failing the run because I used something other than a pistol, I return to Pearl and head over to Good Springs to just enjoy my character for a bit.
Go up the path, past the broken radio tower, and go to the right. They're at the top of the trail. You will? Thank you for helping me. Please hurry.
I also had an interesting occurrence with an NCR ranger while I was trying to kill the powder gangers. Of course, he doesn't like the powder gangers, so he killed them for me. I stood there kind of dumbfounded for a little while before actually being able to kill things over at a nearby camp. After disarming the mines just outside of Primm and making my way inside, I'm able to see just how amazing this pistol is. Here I enjoy using the combination of a light shining in darkness, as well as the silenced 45 pistol. Doing so allows me to take out the guys really quickly while also having the opportunity to be silenced if I want to. This character is insanely fun to play, so I just do a whole bunch of things and enjoy the process as well as go upstairs and clear out some more guys up there. Restoring order to Primm takes me over towards the Mojave outpost, so I take care of a few jackals along the way at the police station, as well as some rat scorpions just outside of the general store. Rat scorpions are definitely a little bit more tanky, but the fire rate on this pistol is absolutely insane, allowing me to take them down with ease. Needing a little bit more experience to reach the level 20 barter check for this particular quest, I talk with Ranger Ghost and kill some more giant rat scorpions. It's actually kind of cool that I'm able to take these guys down without getting hit once. To cut my uninteresting enjoyment short, I end up going over to kill some ants, as well as some more Jackal gang members in the ambush on the road to Nipton. Once at Nipton, rather than interacting with the Legion whatsoever, I decided to immediately get shunned. I do this by stealth killing almost all the Legionaries before they have a chance to even see me. I then, utilizing Joshua Graham's morals, take down all of the crucified powder gangers before returning to Ranger Ghost, and ultimately passing the barter check with Major Knight. Before heading out though, I do talk with Ranger Jackson and take down the ants. This has always been one of my favorite quests, and if you'd like to see a short little machinima that I made at this location, here's a link up at the top right, as well that I had a blast making. Although everybody said that it was kinda janky, so keep that in mind. Jackson gives me a reward that I won't end up using before I return to Lieutenant Hayes and grab the extra support for the town of Primm. Wanting to just naturally progress through the start of the game here, I stealthily killed a few more raiders that had a trap set up before getting to Novac. Here I end up grabbing the bill of sale for Boone's quest, and convinced Jenny May to stand in front of the dinosaur. Boone is forever thankful, although I will not be using him this run. While playing with a companion is always a good bit of fun in these runs, I feel that Joshua Graham would be fine just by himself. While in the area though, I do stop over by the town of Nelson to talk with Ranger Milo. If you haven't figured it out by now, I am going to be doing an NCR run. Because of the fact that Joshua Graham was previously shunned from the Legion, I figured it would be best to go to the other extreme. While Mr. House and Yes Man are two other options, I didn't feel that Joshua would return to the relics of old to succeed in his mission of restoring faith to Mojave. Ranger Milo seems pleased with my ability to rescue the hostages, so I take him out back and show him a good time before getting a little bit hot with some fire geckos over at Chance's map. I wanted to explore this side of the map just a little bit more, as well as unlock the Great Khan Armory, so I can secure plenty of ammo for this run. While the Quartermaster at Hoover Dam is a good bet that I'll be using later on in the run, I enjoy having numerous options. Heading over to the Monte Carlo Suites, I kill a few Scorpion gang members inside, once again showing how effective this gun setup and build is so far. Keep in mind that these are relatively low level raiders, but I still feel that it's a decent show of strength and survivability on the highest difficulty. Popping over to Doc Mitchell's to heal my rads so that I could do a little bit more exploring in some irradiated territory, I head over to the south portion of the map to deal with some golden geckos. I always love going through here just because it's such a fun area and there's often great loot in the armor case and medical kit. The way I've always enjoyed Fallout New Vegas is just by appreciating the game as it is. Just wandering around and seeing where things are. This allows you to naturally progress your character and level up. This time around at level 14, I ended up grabbing the Handloader perk, which of course will allow us to increase our damage output later on in the run. Finishing up a few more golden geckos, I stumbled across Morningstar Cavern. Here it's overwhelmed with several Night Stalkers, so I put them down before exploring a little bit more of the map over at Bradley's Shack. Nothing really too interesting happened over here in particular, but I did get overwhelmed by a crap ton of ghouls. Fortunately, I was able to find a cheese spot and stand up on top of a rock. Always a good thing to do when being chased by the Walking Dead. I also popped into the abandoned trailer and was ambushed by Viper gunslingers. I love little things like this in Fallout New Vegas just because of the fact that it shows the attention to detail, as well as surprises the character in their first playthrough, but also allows them to show their experience in later ones. There was an odd moment after I cleared out this trailer that the Legion assassins just randomly showed up and stared at me. So rather than fighting them, I pulled out my Pip-Boy and just teleported to Vendy. I felt that that was a peaceful way to de-escalate the situation while also not dying repetitively, because at this point I really didn't feel like I was ready to tackle the Legion. I wasn't feeling as strong as what I'd hoped for when I started this run, so I decided to head towards Old World Blues to level up more. Because there are very obvious dips in my analytics every time that I do a story time, we're just going to get a little bit wacky instead and talk about how amazing this DLC really is when you completely avoid everything. The Gooners aren't very much trouble, especially with our fast fire rates, but the biggest concern that I had with this DLC is the lack of ammunition. You can see down in the bottom right now that I have 258 bullets. This single Protectron, albeit with a few extra shots, requires me to use 12 bullets. While that may not seem like very much, it means that I will essentially have to start peeing on everything to be able to kill them. Because of this, I ended up speedrunning through this DLC as quickly as any respectively bisexual owl possibly can. This includes utilizing the perimeter warning to get off the X2 transmitter, as well as bouncing over to the institutional data retrieval quest. Here I just completely avoid all of the enemies like women seem to do me every time that I look in their direction. The other day I had a dream about going down on a woman, and it was amazing, as it tasted like cotton candy. Fortunately, that yearning helped me escape the cyberdogs. I also had pretty decent luck for finding Gabe's digging spot, as it was the first one that I had found. In case you're curious about all the markers on the screen, that's from Jam, or just assorted mods. I definitely recommend checking them out, as there is even a key to disable all of them at will. At level 16, I end up grabbing better criticals, which will of course allow for even more damage. Grabbing all the pieces of the stealth suit as well as the Spec Ops training manual found near the chest plates, I do a little bit of lockpicking, sneaking around and ultimately getting to the safe inside. When all of the robot scorpions spawned, I decided to completely avoid them and rush past before talking with Dr. Klein. We are already to the end of the DLC in less than 30 minutes. This is why I always tell people to take this game slow, because there really isn't much to it if you just stick to the main quest. Sneaking over to the Forbidden Zone, I plant my bussy right into the corner so that I could take out the giant Robo-Scorpion. This just took a lot of bullets, but I want to point out again my ammo in the bottom right. If I would have tried to fight all the scorpions in this DLC, I would have run out of ammo quickly, so I'm glad that I didn't and that I was able to get through relatively unscathed. This leaves me plenty enough bullets to deal with the last portion of this DLC. Before that, I talked with Dr. Mobius. He's actually really handsome, but somebody who is even more handsome is my brain. I'm able to convince my brain using my intense gun skill to join me back in my receptacle before fighting all the think tank members. Things got a little bit dicey here at a certain point, but the damage that I was able to put out with the hollow point rounds was absolutely insane, and Radchild was able to keep me alive. I did want to utilize speech in this particular quest, but unfortunately I did not have a high enough speech nor any magazine to do so. I want to leave a clip of the ending dialogue here to signify the change that this may present to Joshua Graham.
The monitors had recorded the battle in its entirety, including the think tank's final, shrill, terrified screams, whimpers, and pleas for mercy. They broadcast these humiliating last moments as a warning to anyone approaching the perimeter that other smarty pants were not welcome.
After feeling rather miserable about my accomplishments in Old World Blues, I do a little bit of trading at the Great Khan's Armory and appreciate the additional ammo by returning to Old World Blues to do at least one more quest, grabbing all of the Sync's personalities. One big technique that I would recommend using if you do utilize Radchild or even the implant that allows you to regenerate health is being able to step outside and wait. It completely regenerates all of your health and allows you to come right back in with full health and AP. Just in this first area here, you can see me almost struggle with the amount of bullets that I need to put into these robots, but I'm able to end up grabbing the holotape inside as well as some of the other areas. Because of how beefy these guys are, I didn't stick around too long, and just dealt with the bare minimum amount of enemies in each location. While at the collection of houses, I did stick around here a little while and try to loot everything possible. I wanted to learn a little bit more about Old World Blues simply because I have not explored it very much. So I was able to find a key in Boros' house that led to the basement, and you can see all the equipment that he had utilized. This kind of allowed me, as Joshua Graham, to forgive myself a little for how messy things ended. While that wasn't the way he had planned, ultimately it may have been the best option. Stepping back from the script here a little bit and just giving more general advice, if you guys ever need mentats, come here. Like, there are an unbelievable amount of mentats. I never realized how many mentats that there were, but I just feel obligated to let you know that mentats are an amazing thing. Can I say mentats one more time, or is that too much? Finishing up at the house, I ended up going back to the X2 antenna to pick up another holotape before heading into the cave full of lobotomites. Here I have to utilize the exit trick multiple times to be able to fully regenerate my health, so it was a little bit of a struggle. Afterwards, I was able to grab the Muggy project to unlock one of the sexiest NPCs of all time. If anything, Vegas has satiated my robot fetish. While at the sink, I repair my armor. It does get pretty expensive repairing your armor this way, so we'll be tackling a way to repair it better in the future. But keep in mind that the sink is always a great place to repair your gear to 100% if you don't have a high repair skill. Returning to the Mojave, I talk with Thomas Hildren to begin the quest for Vault 22. I of course deal with the awkward moment of the scientist trying to talk to me before I round the corner, before then being forced to utilize TCL to avoid the issue. Angela, you are a true saint, and I love everything about you, but please give me a few extra seconds to wrap my big badonkadonk around the corner. Vault 22 sees me dealing with several giant mantises before popping inside the Overseer's office to unlock all the different sections. This also allows me to grab the keycard after dealing with some spore carriers. I don't have much to say about the difficulty of this run because obviously anytime that you don't have any heavy restrictions, things become pretty easy. But I enjoyed the difficulty of this run with not being able to utilize chems. It was actually a nice experience because I was able to find a couple different other options to be able to do well facing more difficult enemies. But we'll get into that later on. Eventually, I was able to return Keely back to her lab and try the classic option of surviving the fire. It turns out that Joshua Graham is not immune to fire, he just has a really high pain tolerance that would leave many men to be quaking in their boots. In other words, he's pretty hot. Angela appreciates me for saving Keely and I give the data to Thomas Hildren. Yes, I double dipped. No, Joshua Graham probably wouldn't. Do I care? Absolutely not. Doc Mitchell restores my radiation one more time here, and I return to the Devil's Butthole to prepare for dealing with Black Mountain. You may be confused as to why I go to one place to restore my radiation and then immediately to get irradiated. You see, I do want a little bit of Radchild's effects to be able to survive the super mutants, but at the same time, Black Mountain is heavily irradiated, so I need to be careful, especially going to areas like Searchlight to avoid dying due to radiation. That is one downside of Radchild that I typically don't mention thanks to the power of video editing. Climbing my way up towards Black Mountain, I deal with some more super mutants. They became really tricky at certain points, especially when they utilized fire. I'm not sure why I felt like I was really weak to fire, but I'm pretty sure it had to do something with the absolute crap armor condition that Joshua's armor has. It has some of the lowest durability that I've ever experienced, and it breaks unbelievably quickly, but that could be due to the fact that we are on a harder difficulty. Regardless, I'm able to escape and reposition myself to get a better vantage point to continue pushing up the mountain. Because I've played this game way too many times and I'm slightly better than children at being able to acknowledge their surroundings, I'm able to scope out the Nightkin ahead of time and even deal with the sniper that holds Annabelle. I do want to take the time to just mention how amazing these pistols are. For different uses, you've got the ability to sneak as well as fire a massive amount of rounds really quickly. Being able to heal up our fluffy lovebot, I ended up doing something a little bit interesting this run. Rather than sitting through the entire speech that Mistress Tabitha has, I pop into Rail's area and rescue him before the dialogue is actually finished. This causes an interesting occurrence that I haven't had before, where Mistress Tabitha walks out, and almost as if she's going to stop us from leaving, she says,
Mistress Tabitha, we should be heading. I won't let you have my Raoul, but we can catch up if we hurry.
Before she just walks away peacefully. I find this adorable, and I love Fallout New Vegas even more for how quirky it can be. Wanting to take a break from doing side quests and just explore a little bit, I kill some Cazadors and run across Victor. This was supposed to be a test for my abilities, but of course Victor proved that I'm a bottom, and that I deserve to be babied. If any hot sugar mamas or daddies want to hook me up, feel free to support my Patreon. You'll get access to ad-free videos in advance, and get to vote on future runs. Buying some more ammo at the Great Khan's Armory, I waited a period of 3 days to be able to restock their inventory. While this is annoying if you have plenty enough food, it really isn't that big of a deal. Besides, you're able to utilize their ammo bench to make the hand-loaded version of the 45 pistol rounds. Ready to jump back to reality, back to life, I kill some more feral ghouls at RepCon headquarters. I usually like to do this in all of my runs, but I got a comment on the last video that kind of joked about this quest in particular. While I sympathize with people not wanting to do certain quests, if you don't like the quest, just don't do them. Fallout New Vegas has the amazing opportunity that you can do whatever you want to do. I put extra emphasis on you because this is really your game. You can do whatever you want in it. That's why we all came to love this game. There are 4 different endings, none of which are perfect, but your career is who you make them. Whether or not you choose to be an evil or kind individual, or your moralities are neutral and you bounce between the 2 sides, you can do whatever you want to do. So just enjoy the game, and pet all the femboys that are in this community, because it really, truly is beautiful. After watching the climax of the year with the rockets piercing through the sky like little Einsteins, I ended up getting the jury-rigging perk, which allowed me to repair all of my armor and guns much more effectively. I wanted to put this to use as quickly as possible, so I took down some nearby Vipers with the skill of a wounded gazelle and illustrated the fact that I could now repair my gear much more effectively. Any light armor I can repair my gear with, and any standard pistols I can also repair my gear with. Now, feeling a little bit more well-armed and prepared, I stumbled across a Legionary assassin party that I decided to actually take down rather than avoiding. Unfortunately, this didn't go very well regardless, and I ended up having to run away before coming back with a little bit more health. Legion assassins are just not easy to kill. A lot of people in my last video with the thermic lance just mentioned going after Legion assassins to be able to get the thermic lance as quickly as possible. But you have to keep in mind that not only Rex, but Boone and an additional NCR Ranger died while trying to clear that Legion party, making it a particular challenge for even high-level characters. Just after one battle, you can see how damaged my armor is, and the fact that its CT goes from 15 to 8 real quick. Keep in mind that I do have to repair everything very frequently, making this a little bit more challenging than what I had originally intended this playthrough to be. Wanting to make my 3rd assault on the Legion after Nipton and Nelson earlier in the run, I pushed through Searchlight and the feral ghouls before overlooking the sniper's nest and getting a little bit of advantage on the situation. I then of course throw all strategies out the window and just approach them normally, hoping that they wouldn't recognize me as Joshua Graham. Of course they didn't, so I was able to just stumble into their camp. While you could certainly argue that Joshua Graham would be immediately noticeable to all the members of the Legion, I would like to assume that the amount of times between the events and the fact that Joshua Graham supposedly looks nothing like he had looked like when he had served Caesar, that he would be able to sneak in really effectively. Now one thing I will totally agree with is that you couldn't reasonably stealth kill all of them inside, but because this is a video game, I was able to do just that. I was then even able to take down Arios of Phoenix, overlooking the camp before dispatching the final guy and rescuing the Weathers. While this is considered a little bit of a slaughter, keep in mind that Joshua Graham does have that personality where he shifts between the two extremes, both generosity and murder. And it is clear that his hatred for the Legion has not been fixed by his interaction with Salt Upon Wounds. After clearing out Cottonwood Cove of both friend and foe, I end up going and hunting a bunch of lake lurks. This section of the map doesn't really have a whole lot going on to my knowledge outside of the numerous lake lurks, so I was mainly here for experience more than anything. I was also curious about what this space was actually used for. Of course there's the Deathclaw Promontory, but I typically don't go there much just because I'm a Quarry Junction bottom. That said, for this particular run I do end up stopping by there and cutting down a few Deathclaws. Keep in mind that this build is really not that beefy in terms of survivability, and even some of my strongest builds cannot tank a Deathclaw at very hard difficulty. But I was able to utilize their terrible pathfinding when climbing down hills, combined with the river behind us to kind of dip in there, causing them to flee, and then repeat the cycle over and over again until I was able to take quite a few of them down. There was one point where I was able to climb up on top of some rocks and pick a couple more off, but I ended up falling into the ground and I just immediately gave up and was like, alright, well we're ditching here. Needing a little bit more ammo after expending pretty well all of my supply, I waited a couple days and headed over to the Great Khan's armory. Here I was able to craft some hand-loading rounds before passing the credit check and talking with Jane, allowing me to turn in what few snow globes that I had gathered this run. Talking with Mr. House, I was able to trigger the NCR to contact me with their courier, thus allowing me to contact Ambassador Dennis Crocker. His first task was of course talking with Pearl, which I was able to do rather quickly before talking with the Kings to be able to grab their allegiance to the NCR. Crocker ends up sending me to Colonel Moore, and I'm able to talk with Quartermaster Barden for more ammunition. Moore ended up sending me to clear out the Great Khans, but there is a way to make sure that the Great Khans and the NCR can work together peacefully, so that is the route that I ended up taking rather than executing all of them. Talking with Regis, we can learn that if he was in charge that he'd be willing to side with the NCR. Before doing anything else, I returned to Colonel Moore to present that idea and be tasked with assassinating Papa Khan. Pickpocketing the key from Papa Khan and breaking into his room late at night, I'm able to put him down with one bullet before convincing Regis to support the NCR as he had previously mentioned that he was going to. On hardcore difficulty, Stimpaks don't make very much difference in combat because they don't heal immediately. Not to mention that I can't use them this run. Because of this, I ended up picking up the Them's Good Eating perk, which allows me to find the potent healing items Thin Rot Paste, or blood sausages on various enemies. If you see that for the rest of the run, that's where they come from. Colonel Moore once again sends us on another mission to talk with the Omertas. Lisa O'Malley gives us the details and I get to appreciate the receptionist hot clavicles once again. Pickpocketing the book off of Caccino, I'm able to learn about Troik and convince him with my massive amount of speech to blow up the guns himself before pickpocketing the key for Glennon's safe and ultimately presenting to him the evidence that he has some interesting tapes that Patrick Bateman would appreciate viewing. One thing that you can do if your sneak is not very high is pop a stealth boy before walking into a casino, thus allowing you to hang on to your equipment. Using this trick, I actually kill the bosses before I even have to sit on the couch, meaning that I don't actually have to be penetrated. Before I completely alienate the Legion, I do decide to pop over to Lonesome Road and manage to get eaten alive by coyotes before rescuing Eddie. I feel this particular DLC to be really fitting for Joshua Graham, as it shows he is facing all of his demons all at once, and it is a perfect place for a courier to lose themselves. Between all the perks that I picked up so far, I was able to do a massive amount of damage to the sentry bots. Sure, they still shook my core like a good vibrator, but I was able to put them down within 4 magazines at most. Eddie was pleased, and I ended up looting all the stuff that I could find in this DLC to make even more money. Some people kind of scoff at runs like these because they're not particularly challenging, but if you've been doing challenge runs for the last 8 months like I've been, you'd probably be interested in changing things up and playing a little bit more of the game that you don't typically get to enjoy. That includes the DLCs. Taking down more marked men and using the laser detonator on my first warhead, I'm able to prove how effective this setup actually is. Not only is the pistol amazing, but in combination with VATS it actually proves to be even more deadly. Sure, when tackling stronger enemies, it's better to avoid using VATS, but for weaker enemies that you know that you can kill within one magazine, it's actually a decent combination. Keep in mind that I do have the Gunslinger perk as well, though I'm not sure how much that impacts the accuracy. Remember earlier how I mentioned that cool guys don't look at explosions? Yeah, I think it might be cooler to look at explosions. With the help of Eddie, the tunnelers weren't too bad. They just took a lot of bullets, so I was glad that I was able to stock up at Barden and the Great Khan's Armory for more than enough bullets for this DLC. Outside at level 24, I did pick up the Light Touch perk because we are using a light armor for the entirety of this playthrough. With this, we end up getting an additional 5% critical hit chance. That, combined with the rest of the perks that we've picked up so far, allows me to take down the beast with very little issue. Doing a little bit more trading at the commissary and making a ridiculous amount of caps, I blow up another warhead and contemplate doing something unthinkable to a corpse. Attracting the nearby attention of a Deathclaw again with the help of Eddie, he is able to face tank everything, and I'm able to put all the Deathclaws down. This build I would not utilize as a Deathclaw killer because of how fragile it is and its inability to use chems, but it really is satisfying if you're able to get a couple sneak attack criticals on your enemies. I won't hide the fact that I did die here several times, but usually it was because I was caught off guard, or Eddie did not do as good of a job as what I would have hoped. Sneaking around all the mines that I passionately hate, I kill Bonestall and the rest of his goon squad. While the start of this run was certainly a slog and often rather deadly, we've got to the point now where we're able to do quite a lot of damage, and utilizing jury rigging has certainly helped secure that consistency that I was looking for. One place I didn't check out was the Courier's Mile, so if you'd be interested in seeing another video similar to the one that I have up on the second channel for the Thermic Lance, let me know down in the comments below. We've reached over 100 subscribers on the second channel already, so thank you to everyone who checked it out. Last run I had mentioned something about the fact that the tunnelers in this area weren't particularly difficult. I lied. This playthrough, for whatever reason, I think it was probably the lack of chems, I was just not able to kill these guys as effectively. I ended up having to reload this area roughly 3 times before I was able to get to the bottom, but eventually I was able to take down the sentry bot in the following room and repair my gear because I hadn't found any pistols thus far and had plenty of caps. A few more tunnelers later and another level up, I ended up grabbing Atomic. Atomic is a little bit of an interesting perk because it synergizes well with Red Child, but as someone who doesn't utilize action points that much, I didn't really get to appreciate this perk nearly as much as what others might. The two best ways to survive in the Mojave, in my opinion, are to utilize chems in a melee build or use a ranged weapon, with the latter being my preference. These pistols are great in the fact that they can kill from a large distance, but oftentimes it requires all 6 bullets for one to make a hit. Now this could be due to my poor accuracy, but pistols in general are not meant for shooting over long distances. That said, I was able to do relatively well with keeping my distance, thus allowing me to get through most of the combat sections unscathed. Blowing up another warhead and appreciating Fallout New Vegas' scripting, I killed a few more guys in this building and entered the Cave of the Abaddon. This area was not very fun. The amount of tunnelers in here made me want to go cry in a corner and make friendship bracelets to better our relationships. Regardless, I was able to push through and deal with even the Queen thanks to Eddie. He really carries in certain runs with Lonesome Road just because of how tanky he is and his inability to die, so when he leaves due to Ulysses' call, I'm a little bit disappointed. You may be curious about how I handle the 2 Deathclaws, and the way that I chose to do it this run was by luring them out with a couple bullets before dispatching them from afar. It may not be a sniper rifle, but it certainly will kill. Another strategy that I've found for dealing with enemies over long ranges is by utilizing VATS to clearly outline them. Even if you can't make that particular shot, it allows you to adjust your aim appropriately and get you to the next section of enemies. The sentry bot inside of Ulysses' bunker gives me very little resistance, so I'm able to grab Eddie before very long and grab an additional perk, the Professional. When I've heard of this perk in the past, I thought it was great for sneak builds, but not great for general use builds like this one has become. In reality, the fact that it only applies to sneak is false, and the extra 20% is applied to any and all criticals for pistols, making this perk a no-brainer for any late-game builds. Much like Old World Blues, there are 2 endings to the story of Lonesome Road, one in which I kill Ulysses, or one in which we negotiate and come to a peaceful conclusion. I chose to do both this particular run. I started off by killing Ulysses using more bullets than I really care to admit with how aggressive his healing is, before finally putting him and his Eyebots down. The second time around, I sided with Ulysses and had him help with the fight against the marked men that he had set to ambush us. Between the two of us, the second time around was ridiculously smooth, and Eddie was able to sacrifice his life in an emotional finale that I avoided watching. Whether or not you would agree with Joshua Graham allowing Ulysses to live isn't important. The importance of it is the fact that Joshua Graham is slowly overcoming his bloodlust. For my special point from Lonesome Road, I ended up going with endurance for a very specific reason that you will soon find out. Heading over to the tops and presenting the evidence of Benny's lighter, I'm able to put Benny down, as any terrible assassin would, before grabbing the platinum chip and talking with Ilario. Keep in mind that we did kill Volpez and Colta, but we are now bestowed upon with Legion's mark. Waiting this long to deal with Benny means that any and all previous crimes against Legion that we've committed are forgiven. This includes our slaughter at Nipton and Nelson. Wanting a little bit more experience before proceeding with my next plan, I head over to Helios and start the lucky old Sun quest before talking with Fantastic and Ignacio. I'm able to trigger the mine with my hot sexy feet before accessing both of the mainframes, dealing with the turrets inside, as well as Mr. Gutsy with a ridiculously small amount of bullets and several projectons. I'm then able to repair the device and send the power to Fremont and Westside before returning to Ignacio. Now here is where things get interesting. I wanted to push myself over the edge to get to level 30 for some experimentation. So before I level up here, I make a hard save and wait for the level up. Putting points into medicine for no real reason, I grab a perk that might be controversial for this run. Implant GRX. I specifically mentioned at the start of this video that I didn't want to utilize the implants from the clinic, but because of the fact that we have attended Old World Blues, we can tell that the fact that the implants are effective as we do have those particular perks. I ended up grabbing Implant GRX to see whether or not it was actually a Chem. Looking at my Pip-Boy, I see that I still have not taken any Chem so far, and when I end up taking the Implant GRX, that number does not change, meaning that GRX is not considered a Chem based on the game's definition. While it does add the effects of Turbo, it is not considered a Chem. I'm going to be role-playing this run as if it is Joshua Graham's own ability and combat senses that allows us to do this, but of course you are welcome to dislike the video. Because of the fact that I have dedicated so much of the sneak skill to this point, I'm able to just naturally keep the holdout weapons at the fort. This of course is a bad idea on the Legion's part for not searching me a little bit more thoroughly and accessing my prison wallet. This allows me to systematically stealth kill all of the Legion inside, except for of course the one main gate guard that causes you to fail the quest if you kill him. That's why there is one particular person left at the group of 4 at the main gate. The next section goes much the same. It does take quite a few reloads to deal with these individual sections, but being able to kill all of the Legion as if a ghost is wrapping over the fort is something that I feel like Joshua Graham would be able to do rather effectively, utilizing strategy with his calmed bloodlust. It isn't long here before I'm outside of Caesar's tent, and I end up popping all the Implant GRX and once again checking whether or not that it is considered a Chem. Because it isn't, we are safe to enter Caesar's tent with the effects of 5 Turbo, meaning that we are able to slow down time for an extended period of time and successfully kill all the Praetorians as well as Caesar himself. While this is slaughter by standards, the fact that Joshua Graham was able to finally have his revenge on Caesar, I think is of importance, especially with how it was done. It was also fun and I enjoyed myself. Now finally able to pursue the NCR's questline, I pop over to Lucky 38 to access Mr. House's chamber and disable him. Returning to Cassandra Moore, she presents us with one more task, wiping out the Brotherhood. Before proceeding with that quest, I stock up on some more ammo from Barton, grab the holotape for the Repcon headquarters, return to George for my caps after way too many days, snag up the additional holotape at Nellis, and enter the Brotherhood's bunker. One of the things that I always find funny about completing Lonesome Road and sacrificing Eddie is the fact that you were able to become liked by the followers of the Apocalypse and the Brotherhood of Steel for preventing yet another apocalypse. This causes a Brotherhood of Steel scribe to run a few randomly and give you recycled energy cells. This is made more comical by the fact that they immediately throw you into a slave collar and force you to deal with an NCR Ranger. Fortunately, this time around I'm able to utilize the speech skill 50 to lie to him about the presence of hot gingers on the strip before ultimately returning to Elder McNamara. He of course sends me on the usual quest of tracking down his 3 scouts as well as giving me the quest for rescuing the bunker by ensuring that the oxygen system is properly repaired. The first one that I stop by is Vault 11, so I deal with some giant mantises outside before grabbing the differential pressure controller inside a locker that is underwater. It isn't long before I'm leaving to return to Vault 22. Here there were more spore carriers, and I get lost in the maze before eventually getting to the HEPA cartridge filters. I did mean to grab these the first time around, but at that point I was so tired of being in the vault that I didn't really want to be in here any longer. The last vault that I attended was overrun with fiends, so I was able to put multiple of them down into a gentle grave before getting inside and convincing them that I was a member of the Great Khans. I didn't really need to do any convincing here because at this point I am the Great Khans NCR ambassador, but we don't need to pull out our identification. Of course, my olive branch didn't last very long as one individual had a pistol that I wanted to repair my own. This led me to end up killing all the people inside, including Motor Runner. I'm able to dispatch both of his dogs before popping behind him and utilizing one last bullet. I hit up my good old friend Bryce Sanders before returning to the Brotherhood of Steel bunker. I give all the items to Lorenzo before returning to McNamara and mentioning the fact that the NCR is currently looking to destroy them. With his kindness and compassion, I'm able to create a truce between the two factions. While this extra step wasn't necessary, I felt like it would be funny to be a member of the Brotherhood of Steel as Joshua Graham. This character is basically just Johnny Sins. Let me know if you want me to do a Johnny Sins run down in the comments. While I'm already at Hoover Dam, I ended up talking with Jensen to be able to see the President's vertibird. I love the fact that just saying pretty please requires a speech skill of 50, and I think that Fallout New Vegas is a perfect game all around. I'm able to pickpocket the failsafe detonator off the engineer before killing the NCR Ranger that was an assassin for the Legion, and ultimately returning to Ranger Grant to let him know the situation. I'm even able to disarm the explosive on the President's vertibird, allowing them to get away safely. Returning to Elder McNamara to let him know that I was able to secure the relationship between him and the NCR, as well as plant the antenna on top of Black Mountain, I become a Brotherhood of Steel member and I have access to the power armor that they wear. I thought it was comical at this point to see Joshua Graham's wraps on power armor. Please note that I did take off the armor immediately, and that you can play with my butthole instead of taking away all my enjoyment with your hate comment. Stocking up one last time to be able to get all the ammo that I wanted as well as craft it all into hand-loading rounds, I returned to Cassandra Moore to finally complete the game. I'm even able to grab the second level of Implant GRX, which means that I have 10 uses of Turbo. If I would have played this character even longer, I definitely would have picked up the Chemist perk just for the synergy with the Implant GRX. I used Implant GRX really liberally here, and not because I necessarily needed to, but because it's really fun and it somehow manages to improve the game's performance. With how terrible the frame rate usually is in this ginormous area, the massive collection of enemies is very poorly optimized. With Turbo being able to slow everything down, it definitely makes the game run a lot smoother in my opinion. Besides, it looks cool. Once upon the dam, I'm able to put down several more targets above, and wait in the improvised shelter to replenish my Implant GRX. One thing I always find funny about these NCR Rangers is that when you convince them to advance, they almost seem less aggressive with your speech skill. But if you just tell them to secure your flank with snipers, they end up charging forward, and it really doesn't make any sense. It's like they've both got the same AI or they were mixed up. Regardless, I was able to deal with a few more Centurions outside of Leggett's camp and make my way inside. Here I'm able to show how amazing that this build has actually progressed in such a short time span by killing all the Praetorian guards and the legionaries outside. Double checking my Pip-Boy one last time, I see that I have not taken any Chems, Redaway, Radex, or Stimpaks. With the run coming to an end, I abuse all of my Implant GRX before beginning the fight with a Leggett. Personally, I think that Joshua Graham would have killed the Leggett here and not ended everything peacefully. But I of course went back and did the second version as well with the 100 speech skill. The fight with the Leggett himself wasn't particularly difficult, but it did take a lot of bullets and he did try to run away at one point. The sheer speed and fire rate of the light and shining darkness, combined with the effects of Turbo, was able to put him down rather effectively. This left talking with General Oliver and proving that yes, you can beat Fallout New Vegas as Joshua Graham. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, definitely consider leaving a like and hitting subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you to my patrons for supporting my work. You guys mean a lot to me that I'm able to continue doing this and entertain thousands of people. With all that being said, I've been Al, but go ahead and do me a favor, will ya? Have a good one.